Tonight on Primetime Politics, old partners, new opportunities. The Prime Minister heads to London for the second time since taking office, looking for new economic partnerships to diversify Canadian markets. Coming up, former Canadian High Commissioner to London, Janice Charette, on what might be achieved with this trip. Also,
when will the Prime Minister fire this incompetent public safety minister?
Why won't he fire this minister?
When will the Prime Minister fire him?
a rough week for the public safety minister after leaked audio catches him questioning a key government program. Can the Prime Minister afford to keep him in cabinet? Our political strategists will be by. And
this is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and so we continue to work with provinces and territories.
Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu and what the federal government is prepared to do to help Canadians in turbulent economic times. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. The Prime Minister is barely back from New York, but already he has returned to his plane en route right now to London, where Mark Carney will meet his British counterpart to talk cooperation and trade. It is also where he will meet other world leaders as well. But today in the House of Commons, we heard the Conservative leader take issue with the Prime Minister's trip. Take a listen to Pierre Poilievre.
The Prime Minister is on yet another costly and useless photo op tour to escape the inflation, criminality, housing price crisis, and of course the scandal around his public safety minister.
Well, let's have a conversation now. Joining us is Janice Charette. From 2016 to 2021, she served as Canada's High Commissioner in London. Madame Charette, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
So, we just heard Pierre Poilievre criticizing this trip to London. How worthwhile are these international trips?
I think these trips are really important, and I think that in a world like we're living in today, it's good to have friends. It's really important to have friends. And for a country like Canada, our prosperity and our security depends on alliances. That leader-to-leader level contact and relationship is critical to that. And maybe, if you haven't been in government before, in a leadership role, or if you haven't been recently, maybe you've forgotten or don't really understand how important those things are.
Well, he is headed to the UK, and of course we have a long history
Indeed.
with the United Kingdom. And in describing the potential of this trip, we're hearing from government sources that the hope is that this trip will lead to new economic opportunities and partnerships. And when I hear that line, I think about the fact that we and the UK for years were trying to get a comprehensive trade deal passed. Back in January 2024, the UK walked away from those negotiations. Could we see a revival in those talks, given the times in which we live?
Well, let's not lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of trade between Canada and the United Kingdom right now is happening under a trade agreement. There's a little bit left to do, and I'm hopeful that all of the conversations that go on between leaders will help us to close that gap. I'm not sure it's going to happen in this trip, but I'm hopeful that that's going to happen soon. The other opportunity, though, is London is, of course, a center of huge commerce and investment. And I think the Prime Minister, when he's there, is going to make sure that he's meeting with the private sector to show what a fantastic opportunity it is to come and do business in Canada. And he's also going to have conversations with other world leaders. He's meeting with the leaders of Spain and Iceland and Denmark and Australia. And so it is about forging those alliances and building the paths for Canada and Canadian businesses to be able to trade with partners around the world.
Well, we certainly have heard the Prime Minister talk about the investments in national projects. His hope is that they are, using his parlance, catalytic, and that means then that the investment Canada makes would attract other investors. Is that what you're talking about in terms of meeting with investors and business partners in the UK?
Yeah, in order to be able to really achieve some of the great potential in this country to build those trade, energy, and information corridors across the country that the Prime Minister's been talking about. It takes private sector proponents, it takes investment dollars, and so talking to global investors, talking to global companies who choose to come and operate here in Canada, I think is a mark of confidence in this country and the potential that we have. And that will translate to the kinds of opportunities for Canadians, of jobs, of good incomes, and those are all responsibilities of the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm. And you listed out the other countries, the other leaders are going to be there because he will be having, as you say, meetings with Spain, Iceland, Australia, Denmark. Is that solely trade, or is that also defense? Because that's part of what's taking place globally for Canada, because not only are we talking about trying to find new markets, we're also trying to shore up to meet NATO commitments and also for our own security, military commitments.
I think that's true, and we have different relationships with different countries, obviously. With the UK, we're a member of the Five Eyes, along with Australia. We have just entered into an agreement with an important Australian contractor around over-the-horizon radar. As we think about countries like Iceland, we have some shared challenges of operating in the north. Spain is a NATO partner. So, you know, I think variable geometry in terms of the nature of the relationship. But, you know, it's one of the fundamental jobs of the Prime Minister to be able to build alliances to reinforce our prosperity and our security. And that, I think, is really what the goal of this trip is for the Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm. The goal. So what are you watching out for? Because, you know, it's depending on the country, the achievements or the goals seem to be very different. And how much you can actually achieve in what is basically a 48-hour period, I guess, is a question mark.
So I don't know, like, it's not white smoke comes out of a chimney or some big announcement necessarily that you're going to see. Relationships are built meeting after meeting after meeting. It's just not just on a one and you're done. And so I think what we're going to see out of this, I mean, the Prime Minister's now been in office for just over 6 months. This is his fourth trip, or his fourth bilateral visit with the United Kingdom. What we're seeing there is a real pattern and a depth of those relationships, and I think that will translate into business opportunities for Canadians, for Canadian companies, and the attraction of investment from UK companies. And I hope we're going to see that in those other countries that he's seeing as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, before we're done, I want to go back to what we heard from Mr. Poilievre in terms of criticizing this international trip. You know, regardless of criticism, do you think this is going to be a hallmark of this government, of this Prime Minister, that we'll be seeing more of these international trips?
I think every Prime Minister has a very significant set of responsibilities on the international stage. Canada, a member of the G7, a member of the Commonwealth, a member of NATO, a member, observer at APEC. There are a tremendous number of these multilateral obligations that we have, and multilateralism is a pretty key aspect of how Canada's prosperity and security is protected as a middle power. I think the Prime Minister gave a big speech on this actually just earlier this week. And so, yeah, it's important to actually do these trips, but I don't think that they should ever be seen by Canadians as trips about going and, you know, being in fancy places with fancy people. This is actually about advancing the interests of Canadians, and that's what that's what the core purpose of these trips are. And maybe, just maybe, if we're lucky, you'll be there to see Canada beat the English women in the rugby.
Which is a question mark whether or not he'll actually be at the match come Sunday, but we will see. And yeah, go Canada.
Indeed.
Janice Charette, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Well, on the subject of trade, Canada did sign a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Indonesia last night, the deal aiming to achieve tariff-free trade on the vast majority of goods between the two countries. Now, it is expected both Canada and Indonesia will ratify the deal in less than a year's time.
Over 95% of the tariffs on Canada's current exports to Indonesia will be reduced or eliminated. They will all be at preferential rates, making our exports obviously far more competitive and giving Canadian workers and businesses greater access to a market of over 300 million people, a GDP of $2 trillion that will rise rapidly given your policies.
We consider Canada to be a very responsible, mature, leading power of the West, but with great empathy for the concerns of the developing nations.
This is the first trade deal in the region signed by Mark Carney since becoming Prime Minister and promising to diversify Canada's markets. Ottawa also hoping this will be the first of many other trade agreements to be signed in the countries of the critical Indo-Pacific region. Well, both the Public Safety Minister and the government's buyback program for guns suffered big setbacks this week after leaked audio exposed what sounded like Gary Anandasangri's doubt in the government program. But take a listen to how the minister explained it to us on Tuesday.
It was a private conversation between two individuals, someone I've known for many years. In it, I explained the program, and of course, there's two areas where I said things in humor that probably didn't come across as such on tape.
Well, joining us now are Liberal strategist and principal at Blue Sky Strategy Group, Susan Smith, Conservative strategist Cole Hogan, and former director of NDP Communications, now principal at On Step Strategies, George Soule. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
Okay, so listen, you know, the bit more of the backstory here. The Prime Minister says he has confidence in the minister. However, you listen to the Conservative leader, and he's calling for Mr. Anand Sangri to be fired by the Prime Minister. Can the minister actually stay in the office, considering what a big stumble this is on such an important file?
Well, the Prime Minister has said he's there, so he's there, and it is an important file. It's a compensation program to get assault-style weapons off the streets, and so far they've managed to get 12,000 of them off the streets, and these are military-grade weapons that shouldn't be in neighborhoods, shouldn't be in people's homes, shouldn't be in their gun boxes in their houses, and that's the point, and it's about the safety of Canadians. So what I'm hearing is, in fact, the government's doubled down, and the enthusiasm from caucus to get it moving is even stronger. So it's working. It doesn't touch hunting rifles. Legal, legitimate hunting rifle owners can continue to do that.
But the minister has this big stumble because of this recording, though.
Well,
I mean, the program aside, like, I mean, it is at the end of the day a minister who's caught on tape expressing doubt in the worthiness of a program.
I think, as the minister said, he was having a private conversation with a tenant on the front step, and the tenant is someone, I guess, who has a locker full of guns as well, locked up guns in their house. So he got trapped in a conversation that he didn't think, and I think it was his inside voice, maybe not his outside voice, who knows, and he said there was an attempt at humor there. It didn't land well. But the bottom line is the program's working. It's the right thing to do. Assault-style weapons shouldn't be on the streets, and the government's going to continue with the program.
Okay. Is that enough, Cole? Because again, the Conservative leader says he shouldn't stay in the position.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a few things are at play here, and I'll give the minister full credit for going out there and attempting to clean up his own mess. As ineffective as it might be, I imagine that's a bit of a difficult exercise to do. But I think what we've seen here is the minister interacted with someone who thinks the same thing he does about the Liberal gun buyback program, and that it's not going to be effective, especially when we face the reality that the majority of illegal guns come into Canada from the U.S., and I think that there's some skepticism as to whether the minister can address the fact that, well, what he said in private and now he's being held accountable for publicly is the fact that this won't really address crime and public safety. So now that we're seeing that, I think the minister's time in this particular role, maybe he won't be gone today, maybe not tomorrow, but I think in the next shuffle we'll probably see him somewhere else.
Yeah, and underline the fact that when that's what we're hearing, it actually backs up what the opposition's been saying about this program rather than what the government's been saying about this program. George, what do you think? Can Anand Sangri keep this position?
Well, I think the real question is, can Dominic LeBlanc take on another role? Excuse me. How many times can the Prime Minister shuffle the cabinet and dump more on Dominic LeBlanc? Like, I think that is genuinely a problem. I think so. In situations like this, either the minister has to go or the Prime Minister wears the mistake. And those are the two options. Either the Prime Minister says, I back this person, I own it, or the Prime Minister says this person's fired from their job. And I think, you know, and the other problem with this situation is both Liberals and Conservatives for decades have loved to talk about gun control as a way to beat each other up in election time and try to take each other's votes. And that's largely what it's become, which is part of the problem with this program, is that it's been so slow moving because I think in some ways the Liberals wanted to make a big deal about it rather than actually getting the job done. And so I think that's part of what the minister brought up. I think, you know, if you're saying that the program's not good enough, and don't worry, if you're not going to get the money that you want, I'll pay you back. Well, I know a lot of people back home in North Bay and in Sudbury who I'm sure would like to make sure that the minister will back up what they don't get back in their guns as well. You know, so I think that's the problem. If you're a minister and you express doubt on a program that you're responsible for, I think that is a big deal that isn't something that can be easily swept under the rug.
Yeah, so, okay, and you know, back to you, Susan, then. If he's going to stay in this position, does there need to be some type of strategy to rehabilitate his authority as public safety minister, or the validity of this program?
I think the validity of the program is valid. It's working. There are 12,000 assault-style firearms that are off the streets. That's better than having those 12,000 assault-style firearms in people's neighborhoods, right? And I don't know how you can be against a program that tries to get those voluntarily off the streets for people. The minister's performance has been far from stellar.
Does it need rehabilitation, though?
I mean, I would think so. This isn't the first time that we've seen slip-ups from this particular minister. And I think what's going to be very interesting for the Liberal caucus is watching how Mark Carney's PMO deals with this particular minister. Does he have a long leash, or do they shuffle them out sooner than later? That will be a measure of conduct going forward for the rest of this parliament.
Okay, George?
I think on that last point, yeah, I mean, I think Justin Trudeau got to the point where he kind of just ignored problems and let them dangle for a long time, which I think piled up on him. You know, Mr. Carney's business style would indicate probably a swift action. Now, if he doesn't do that, that might indicate a change in him trying to figure out the politics of all this. And I think that instead of focusing on some of the bigger things he should be focusing on, this is now the debate on this table, and that, I think, strategically is the real problem.
Okay, so we'll see how that evolves. Listen, I also want to, before we're done today, talk about another topic, and this has to do with Conservative motions and Canadian priorities, because we saw now the Conservatives using another opposition day, their third in this first 2 weeks of the fall session, raising the issue of affordability. Their first one was on bail reform. I wonder if the government risks losing the narrative, because when you look at the polls right now, it is affordability that is top concern. Crime has certainly been a matter of discussion around dining tables across the country. And, you know, not to say it's not valid in its own way, but the Liberals right now still very much about the Donald Trump language. Do they risk losing the narrative when the Conservatives are essentially dead on, the concerns being, the pollsters tell us, are a top concern for Canadians, Susan?
I think the Liberals can walk and chew gum at the same time. They just need to do a better job of it. When it comes to affordability, that's what the Prime Minister is working on when he's working on trade deals and security deals and Buy Canadian and shoring up the defence industry and increasing the markets that we can do business with. That actually has domestic reverb. If you caught Question Period today, and I'm sure many of your viewers will have seen it, you know, there was talk about the school food program that the Conservatives voted against. That's an affordability measure. There's the dental program. That's an affordability measure. The Carney government has already upped the pay for members of the military. That's an affordability measure. Shoring up the economy so people can continue to have jobs and that there's more investment in Canada, those are affordability measures. They need to do a better job of telling that story. And some of those measures take a little bit more time for people. And that's what I recognize is frustrating for people. So they could, I think, walking and chewing gum at the same time is actually happening. They just need to tell the story a little bit better.
Okay, Cole, what do you say?
Yeah, I think there's a few things at play here, because to Susan's point, the Liberals have to do more than one thing at once. I think the Conservatives are right to focus on crime and public safety and bail reform for a couple reasons. This issue, you know, you go across downtown Canada, it's increasing in relevancy for the majority of Canadians, so that's, you know, a hot button issue you always want to be addressing when it comes to safety. The last polling I looked at that we were talking about in terms of who Canadians trust most to deal with these issues, it had Conservatives at 66% to deal with crime and safety, and the Liberals at 17%. So I think they're right to focus on this issue, particularly on bail reform, when so many, you know, violent acts are being committed by repeat offenders. That's something that I think is top of mind for people. For the Liberals, on the other side of this issue, I think they want to continue to focus on Trump because that's what they're most trusted to do. Why wouldn't you keep going back to that well? But you're going to have to do more than one thing at once. And as we see, you know, Carney and the Trump issue fall down to maybe fourth or fifth, where cost of living is up above that, the economy and housing. The Liberals will have to focus on international issues and domestic issues. And we've seen what I think so far is a preference from Carney to focus on the international stuff. And if the domestic issues become more of a concern for Canadians, I think that's where Conservatives have the political edge and the Liberals may be weak.
Okay, you're dying to get in.
Well, I think in some cases, many of the international issues are actually domestic issues. When you build up trade corridors, when you are participating in the broader security discussions, NATO, military, those are domestic issues too, and they do shore up and they do address the affordability issue. And you're right, a Prime Minister has to be able to walk and chew gum. They have to be able to focus on more than one thing at the same time. But just because the Prime Minister is internationally speaking with Australia, England, Spain, Iceland, Denmark over the weekend. Those are important relationships for the economy. Pierre Poilievre doesn't have anything else to talk about. He can't do a trade deal. He can't fix tariffs. He can't create jobs or bring in policy to fix the economy. The country decided in April they didn't trust or want him to do that. So Mr. Carney is doing what Canadians asked him to do.
Those are the things on which Mark Carney will be measured, though. Now that the Trump issue and international issues are, falling down, Carney's long-term success will be judged on domestic issues. Like, if you can do all these trade deals or attempt to get one, we haven't seen a lot of progress on that front, you're going to be judged on domestic issues across the country. And if he and his ministers on Carney's side, the Liberal side, can't get that done, maybe we see poll numbers start to shift.
Okay, George?
Yeah, I mean, look, in the same way that Pierre Poilievre has never worn out a pair of work boots, Mark Carney doesn't understand what it's like to wonder how you're going to pay for bread, or if you have to pass up milk this week in order to pay for the can of soup for your kids. He doesn't understand those affordability issues in a fundamental way. And he got away with it in the last election because it wasn't two different issues. Donald Trump was a stand-in for affordability. Donald Trump was a stand-in for our own security, both like internationally, but also just in our own homes. As that becomes less clear, or it kind of runs its course, it comes back to these very basic, how can I afford the bills at the end of the month kind of issues. And I think Mark Carney isn't seen as someone who gets that, because he doesn't. And even today, when he stood up and talked, when he includes dental care, for instance, as one of the things that's going to make life more affordable, meanwhile, he's also said he's not going to make provinces that aren't interested in sign deals. It shows that his priorities are not with people's kitchen tables. They are somewhere else. And unless he can somehow make people believe that Donald Trump's the boogeyman again, I think, again, like we said last week, I think it's a real problem for him.
Yeah, okay. Again, we're going to have to watch that one. To be fair, when the election was going down and Trump was fading in the election, the Conservatives were going up in numbers. So I think this is something we're going to have to watch here on the Hill. Susan, Cole, George, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael.
Okay, time now for a look at what else happened in politics today. The parliamentary budget officer says government spending and revenue shortfalls will result in a larger than expected deficit this year. The watchdog estimates the upcoming fall budget could include a $68.5 billion deficit, a nearly $17 billion difference from what was projected in last year's fiscal update. Still, the finance minister reacted to the news this morning, expressing confidence in the government spending plan and fiscal guardrails.
This is going to be a generational investment in our future, and our fiscal anchor have been very clear. We've said it last week. We've said it in the platform. What you see as the fiscal anchor in the platform are the fiscal anchor of this new government.
The corporation lost $407 million, their worst quarter ever. And at present, the corporation is losing $10 million every day. In short, Canada Post is effectively insolvent, and it is facing an existential crisis.
Canada Post is about to undergo significant reforms after years of losing billions of dollars. Canada's Minister of Government Transformation, Joel Lightbound, unveiled a series of operational changes today. Among them, a reduction in door-to-door mail delivery, closing thousands of post offices, and delivering more mail by land rather than air. But the reaction from the Canadian Union of Postal Employees has not been positive. Tonight, it announced all their members are now on strike. And finally, Quebec's government just announced an end to the use of gender-neutral language in all official communications. The province's French language minister, Jean-François Roberge, says gender-neutral language creates incoherence and does not follow grammar rules. Critics of the decision say the move is a distraction and is an attack on transgender and non-binary Quebecers. Well, to another story now, because according to economists we've been speaking with, the economic outlook does not look great in the coming months. And already Canada is dealing with unemployment numbers we have not seen in years. Last week, the Minister of Jobs and Families, Patty Hajdu, was in Northern Ontario talking about the government's new response initiatives for tariff-exposed sectors. Now, recently, I also spoke to her about what other supports or retraining her government is offering to help Canadians who are dealing with tough times.
Yeah, a few different ways, Michael, and I would say, first of all, the Prime Minister, in many of the announcements over the summer, indicated that we would be supporting the provinces and territories to do what they do best, which is to provide training that's appropriate to their individual markets. What you need in Thunder Bay, Ontario might be completely different than the needs of even Brampton, Ontario, never mind over on the island of PEI. And so I think it's really wise the way that the Prime Minister has set this up, that we are utilizing the power and the intelligence and the data of provinces to make sure that the training meets the demands for workers in those regions. We also have, as you know, a high youth unemployment rate, and although the provinces have the bulk of the responsibility and really the intelligence to be able to get to those youth quickly and understand what their needs are, we also have specialized programs for young people either that are not in school, not in training, or on the other end, we have a number of different opportunities through partners for paid learning experiences for postgrads, so that postgrads coming out of college and university actually have a chance to attach to their sector, to the labor market. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and so we continue to work with provinces and territories on what's going to suit their needs best, with the end goal of making sure people are set up to really take advantage of sort of these changing times.
So facilitating the resources that are there. But you know, Mr. Davies, the interim leader for the NDP, he's also calling on the government to support direct job creation programs as a way to respond to unemployment and, you know, these economic turbulent times. Are you considering direct job supports?
Well, we do provide direct job supports. I don't know where Mr. Davies has been. I mean, Canada Summer Jobs is a direct job support, and in fact, we increased it by $25 million last summer. I saw those warning signs on youth employment, and it was an area where we could immediately pump in extra money for about 6,000 more jobs across the country, so those very vulnerable youth could actually get a job in their own community, in their own sector. These are good jobs. These are actually jobs that can result in skill development that allow for that young person's next step in their workforce journey. The other thing I would say is that there are, as I mentioned before, there are a number of additional supports the federal government provides on top of the $3 billion every year that provinces and territories receive as the labor market transfers, to provide things like, you know, many communities across Canada have some version of a youth employment center that helps young people work on resumes, on interviews, on preparing for the workforce, and actually landing that first job or subsequent job.
Now, he is also suggesting, or it's not so much suggesting, but sounding an alarm right now about potential job cuts in the upcoming federal budget. What should we expect there?
Well, listen, the Prime Minister has been very clear. In order to invest in Canada through things like the Major Projects Office that we just announced, through our goal of building 100,000 homes a year through the Canada Homes Agency, we need to be really laser focused on what's working and what's not working, what we can do in a more streamlined way to make sure that we can invest in Canadians. And that's the work that all of us have been doing. Each minister is responsible for a suite of services, programs, and other kinds of supports for Canadians, and we're all doing this with the sole intent of making sure that Canadians have what they need, not just for this period of time, but in the future as we grow the strongest economy in the G7.
Minister Patty Hajdu. Now, we have, by the way, posted the full interview online. You can see it on our website or on our YouTube channel. Well, that is our program for this Thursday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow. Until then, take care.